Good afternoon, everybody, dear members and other viewers. It's a great pleasure to host you here at the 26th Annual General Meeting of the Nordic Chamber of Commerce in the Czech Republic. As usual, before we get into the nitty-gritty official affairs of the General Meeting, we always have a keynote speaker, who will talk about some hot topic. Today we have the pleasure of having Mr. Lukáš Kovanda here today. He's a PhD. He has a PhD in economics. He's the member of the think tank NERV, key economist at the Trinity Bank. He's an author, journalist, and also a TV personality, and probably doesn't need any further introduction. He works daily with analysis and commenting on various macroeconomic issues like COVID, sharing economy. He has strong opinions about currency, the euro and cryptocurrencies among them, and his list of accolades is very long. But we're not going to go into that now. Mr. Kovanda is, I understand, also a keen runner and has many marathons under his belt. And is there anything, Mr. Kovanda, that you would like to correct or change or deny at this stage?
Niels, thank you very much for a nice introduction, but I would slightly correct you. It's not many marathons, okay. Just 4.
That's many.
Just 4.
I have only one, so,
so
many more than me.
Okay, a few marathons I would correct it, but other than that, perfect. Thank you very much for nice words.
Okay, so the key topic that Mr. Kovanda is going to talk about is that if there is a light of the tunnel after the pandemic, and how far or how long will that tunnel be?
So I think currently we are just few steps from the light finally. We may see it in the streets here in the Czech Republic that restaurants are opening and shops as well. So finally it seems to me that really the light is here, but I have a slightly deja vu with comparison with last year, because in May, June, July last year it was quite similar, that many people were in euphoria from the opening of the economy, and even industrial production was booming significantly. But as we know now, autumn came and there was a
third wave.
Spike in the disease and in COVID-19 wave. So I'm quite afraid that it may repeat. But the big difference currently is that we are vaccinated, and last year we weren't. So I hope this will help our economy as well. And of course there is a danger of some really frustrating mutation of the coronavirus. Now they are called by Greek letters, so alpha, beta, gamma. So let's suppose there are just 4 these mutations and not more. And if there is the scenario and if there is the development in the coming months, I think we will be able to handle and tackle the problem, the issue, and our economy won't stop anymore, and we will finally recover from the situation, not just here in the Czech Republic, but in European Union and globally as well. So I am optimist. But I was optimist last spring as well, so be careful with that.
I was also very optimistic in May last year, but things took a twist for the worse. And I must say, you know, I'm from the hospitality industry, and I think that airlines, hotels, and restaurants have a long way to go before any normalization is expected. I can also just tell you from my experience now, we kept the key staff during the pandemic, and it's almost impossible to get the staff back now because they have chosen other careers, and they also are afraid of September coming and now going away from their maybe lesser paid job to come back to the hospitality industry. They just simply don't dare to, because they're afraid that wave 5, I believe they call it, is going to come in September, and they have to restart the whole process of applying for a new job.
And I would add to that it's a sign of the fact that our government has been quite successful in rescuing the economy.
Well,
because
you could say that.
I of course agree with the critic that it was chaotic and so on and so on. But I think that with programs like antivirus, for example, or compensation payments for entrepreneurs, I think government really helped. So now the people are not in any urgency to really find a new job, so they can choose. And that's one of the reasons behind you just mentioned.
Yeah,
so
no, it obviously is. There's still no unemployment here.
Yeah, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the European Union. Just Poland is before us. So I think to some extent we were economically successful during the pandemic, not epidemiologically, because our numbers were really bad, as we already said, especially last autumn and at the beginning of this year. But hopefully we will overcome it as well. But epidemiologically, of course, it's not success in any way.
But you also know there is even though there was some help, and the antivirus program, saved a lot of lives, and also COVID-19 and this entrepreneur, the 500 per employees that you'll get a day, etc. And but that only covered, I just saw today, 30% of the costs of. So for 16 months, we as employers have been paying out of our pocket the rest to survive, and that's why we're on this subject today, our topic, that how long is this going to last before we're back to normal?
I completely agree with you. I don't want to sound like that I'm really not aware of the problems of many entrepreneurs. I am aware of it. This is crisis K, letter K, meaning that there are one group of people who is not affected in any way, economically, financially, by the pandemic crisis. Government officials, government workers paid from public budgets, they are not affected in any way. Pensioners here in the Czech Republic are not affected in any way economically. But on the other hand, entrepreneurs, especially in hospitality, in service sector, they are really affected in very, very bad way. And it's K, crisis. So one group of people go up, and second group of people go down. So there is increasing gap amongst these groups of people, which is quite dangerous in my eyes from the point of view of social tensions and even political polarization. We may see it in these elections here in the Czech Republic in October this year. So I'm expecting that will be a huge change in Czech political sphere. We will see. We have two new coalitions, but that's another thing. I agree with you that it was really a difficult year, very challenging year for entrepreneurs. I admire them a lot because they are still a core of our economy. So
well, it's still like the hospital. Just restaurants is it's 130 billion tax revenues, 250,000 employees. Maybe not much more now, but that brings me to my next question, because the migration from the hospitality to other industries has caused a high pressure on salaries. We also face, due to the supply chains are a little bit rigid right now, so we don't get supply so easily, so the prices go up. I heard just Pilsner Urquell, which is like a national indicator of are going to increase the beer by 2 crowns per half liter. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But so and also the prices of real estate has gone up like mad, which I saw you wrote something about at one stage. So there is an inflationary pressure here. That is how the national bank, the government, and all the other stakeholders going to deal with that before we get out of this tunnel.
That's very interesting information about the beer, that it's going up its price. There is saying in the Czech Republic that the government that
will never last.
They makes beer more expensive is overthrown or is finished because of people got angry with that government and the expensive beer. So I think it's quite dangerous. But I agree that there are forces in the economy, and not just in the Czech economy, but globally, for inflation pressures, even including beer and stuff like crops and
all
lumber,
raw materials,
steel. Everything goes up, so which is of course a strong inflationary pressure. And it may be political consequences as well. But currently, the inflationary shock, I think, is just transitory.
Could be, yeah. Let's hope so.
That's outcome of the pandemic. I'm sometimes, for me, it's to some extent similar when you are, for example, 14 days ill, and after 14 days you return back to work, back to your office, and now all the emails from the 2 weeks period you were ill are there. You have to answer them as quickly as possible. So there is, of course, a time pressure for you. Your time is going more expensive because of this, because you have to do as much as possible to catch what you lost during your illness. So I think similar development now we are facing in the macroeconomy because of last year, because of closures and so on. So we are now trying to compensate for the last year closures and produce more and more and make exchanges and transactions more and more. So there are hurdles and there are problems with shipping and so on. As you said, for example, the Suez crisis, the big container ship in the canal was one of the sign of that race to really catch the last year, and we may see that it brings inflationary pressures because of hurdles in international trade and because of growth of raw materials prices and producer prices, and it will to some extent go into the consumer prices as well. So we have to face the reality of higher inflation in the Czech Republic, in European Union, globally. But I think, and many central banks think, that it would be only transitory. So the inflation pressures will weaken next year, and afterwards the inflation return to normal pre-pandemic levels, maybe even lower. So I'm not afraid anymore of that. But I agree that there are some economists who are really quite nervous, and they are not so calm,
optimistic,
like me, for example, like central bankers, because it's a job of central bankers to calm down, to somehow lower the inflationary expectations. So that's their job, and my job is to tell true. And in my eyes, I think it's transitory, but it's 80% likelihood. 20% really is that there are forces behind like geopolitical forces and demographic forces that may make inflationary pressures longer term and not just transitory.
Well, it also depends on what all national banks do, right, in various countries, and now Czech Republic obviously has a greater possibility to move as it has its own currency. What do you think will happen to the crown versus the euro and the other strong currency, the US dollar, over the next year?
Inflationary pressures for Czech crown pose a force for their strengthening against the currencies you mentioned, so against dollar, against euro. So we have seen quite significant strengthening of the Czech currency, quite strong appreciation of it against both dollar and euro. That's so strong currently that it starts to be a problem for our exporters, such a strong
and
Czech currency.
Hospitality again.
So there is, of course, for tourism it would be better, as you said, weaker Czech crown, because of course that then Czech economy is more attractive because it's cheaper for foreign people, for foreign tourists, but still compared to pre-pandemic levels is still weaker. It's not so strong like before because it's still above the threshold of 25 Czech crowns per euro. Before the pandemic it was under this threshold, so it was quite strong, but I do not expect that this pace of strengthening of the Czech currency vis-a-vis euro will continue in coming months. So our forecast for the end of this year is 25.2 Czech crowns per 1 euro. So we are not afraid of some really rapid strengthening that would continue in the second half of this year. It would be really quite difficult then for our exporters, because last year weak koruna really helped them a lot to be more competitive abroad. So it's not in our interest right now, or in exporters' interest, to have such a strong currency. But when I already mentioned inflation, if there are really strong inflationary pressures, Czech National Bank would have to increase interest rates significantly, and that is what makes any currency more attractive. So there is this danger of
course, that was my next question.
rapid growth in interest rates, and then it would make Czech currency very strong, and it would not be definitely helpful for our exporters.
But you remember in 2008-9, the currency, even before the financial crisis, spiraled out from 23 to the euro to up to 34, and you know that for instance killed all low-end tourism, which wasn't so bad, but it just killed it with one stroke, and it was even before the financial crisis started. But then that was of course a much higher gap. Of course, if it's within 1 or 2 crowns for the euro, it's not significant to that matter, but if it's 30 and above, then I think that would be very, very bad. And it has if the National Bank, I would believe, increases the interest rate, it will kind of have a bit of a spiraling effect, or I fear that. But,
but the other thing is, and it's quite positive in this
everybody
regard,
else will too, maybe.
that when the currency is strengthening, it tightens currency conditions in the economy. So if there is strong appreciation of the currency, you don't need such a rapid growth of interest rates, because the strengthening of the currency do the job instead of the central bank, if you understand.
No, sure. Yeah.
So when there is a strong currency, there won't be any need for the Czech National Bank to increase to do so many hikes as the market now thinks that he would need to do. So I think it will be manageable finally. But of course, it's a challenge for exporters, especially in this time when they are recovering from the pandemic situation. But numbers just yesterday, numbers for PMI production or purchasing managers index, the conditions in Czech industrial production are great. That's best numbers, month-to-month improvement in the history of the index since 2001. So even though that there is quite strong pressures on Corona, our industrial production is very well, and the entrepreneurs and firms in the industrial production are very optimistic about the coming months.
Yeah, let's hope so. We have. There is also a lot of other change here. People start to behave differently. We have another thing, which is the hospitality industry. We will see a lot less business travel. The Zoom and the Teams and other software platforms are just taking over the unnecessary business travel, and also the conferences, and that will change the picture for the hotels, for the restaurants, for airlines, not the least. And how do you see that pan out? That it will be for a while and then people start again, or is that a change that is here to stay?
In some aspect, of course, it's here to stay, this change. For example, all years and all days when people were moving and gathering together for a congress, for example, some scientific congress, or to just debate some question, and they were flying from all around the world to one place, and they were staying in a fancy hotel for 3 or 4 days, just discussing the matters and so on, and partying. Of course, I think these days are over, because during the pandemic, of course, we have seen that it's quite easy and quite cheap, and I would even say quite green.
Of course, it's greener.
To gather together via online platforms. It may not be so human, because of course you are not discussing with a person, but just with a computer, and person is in long distance from you, but it's very cheap, and it's very efficient from the point of view of energy consumption. So I think this is new trend, and it is here to stay. But of course, there will be again some gatherings of human people. That's for sure. But it won't be so intensive and so frequent like before the pandemic, because to a large extent it will be substituted by this new online gatherings and online platforms.
Yeah.
So I think the COVID-19 just accelerated some trends and some phenomena that were already going, and they were already present in the economy and in the society before the pandemic hit. So I don't see it as a revolution. It was just a quickening of an evolution.
Absolutely. And then we're coming to the debts, and the debt's not, well, Czech Republic is not so bad, but the euro is going bananas, and the US with his, what was it, $9 trillion spending or something. Well, where's this going to come from, and where's this going to end?
Oh, it's a very tough question. Of course, it's a big problem. I think biggest problem maybe for the Western world as well. Not just Western world, even in developing countries, the debts have been going up because of the pandemic. As you said, in Czech Republic, we are quite okay. That we have quite low debts in comparison to many countries in European Union, but still the pace of the growth of our debts is quite high. It's one of the highest currently in the European Union. So we have to stop it as well here. And in the Czech Republic, there is no program whatsoever what to do with the debt spiral. Even rating agencies that are very influential in the financial world, like Moody's, really are warning that if there is no plan of consolidation of the Czech economy and Czech finances, public finances, it may pose a threat for our future sustainability of the public finances, and it may lead to a lowering of our rating and rating outlook, and then it would in effect or influenced our economy in very bad manner, and the price of our debt would go up and interest rates would go up. So it's a dangerous situation for us, because investors all around the world do like Czech Republic because of quite low level of debt, and that's one of the reasons why Czech koruna, as you already mentioned, in last 30 years has been quite stable and strong, even compared to other countries and compared to other currencies in the region. So that's really a playing with fire, I would even say. And it's not a problem for 1, 2, 3 years, but then we need a plan of consolidation. How we will pay for all the debts? We do not know how to do it. And there will be a new political representation this autumn, and we still. I went through the programs of the new coalitions, and it's not
high on the agenda
to some extent, but it's not satisfactory from my point of view. And the bottom line is we will need to raise taxes. The only thing is which taxes we will raise.
Yeah. And then it might not be so attractive to invest here anymore if the taxes goes up. And
that's for sure. And we need to attract investors from foreign. Our problem, as you know better than me, that there is a huge outflow of dividends from our country, and when we would be able just a third of this investment or this dividend to influence them to stay here in the Czech Republic, it would be a huge boost for our economy. So I think it's one of the best way how to improve our economy, because we need to get onto another level, higher level. We are not, we may not be for next 10 years Montovna, the economy based on just putting together some parts, for example, cars. We need to have here more research, more development, more even marketing, more design, and so on, more creativity. Because without that, we are not competitive enough.
But that is kind of very difficult. You know, in tourism, Prague as a city, it's beautiful, but it's not Paris. And if suddenly Prague starts to cost the same as Paris, people go to Paris. Yeah. And that is the same problem, that you have had a reliable workforce here, and very good one, much better than the comparing countries in Central Europe. But if the wages go significantly up, you won't have that advantage anymore. And
that's for sure.
You better develop research and development very quickly before the salaries catch up with the economy. So
we need a gradual way out of the current situation. I agree with that, but it's not sustainable, I think, the current situation, because even electromobility, we are still very dependent on a car production that is the old one.
Of course, yeah.
Diesel and old 20th century automobiles. So I'm quite afraid that this strong dependency can be killing us quite soon. So that's a major threat I see for the Czech economy, because 10% of our economy are just cars or automotive, and that's a very high number. We have no plan B how to substitute this if there is a major turn for electromobility.
But
in
you
next
will
years.
assume that Skoda will have to take, that's not coming from the government. Skoda must start to produce electric cars.
Government should just.
They can give incentives, but it will never. It will never.
And I agree completely and fully with you that it's up to entrepreneurs and firms to be more innovative, but they need infrastructure. They need qualified workforce, and that is something that government may help with.
Yeah, education, of course.
Education, but
key on the agenda.
It's a marathon run. It's for a long time to improve educational system. So we cannot expect that just in 1 year or 2 years we will have much better study outcomes of our students and our pupils, because in international comparisons we are going down, not up, and you cannot turn it in just 1 month or 1 year. It's a longer term.
When I hear politicians in Norway and elsewhere, they say the same thing. We're going down. Everybody's going down.
Because this problem of Europe as
welfare
such,
state.
Welfare state. Because the welfare state disincentivize people from education, and when you look at the numbers of Koreans and people in China, they are much better because there is no welfare state.
But you wouldn't want to live there, I guess. So.
Yeah, it's comfortable to live in welfare state, but it's living on the future debts. So.
Of course. Going back a little bit to the future debts, but you know that the debts were increased by gazillions in the US, but the monthly or yearly payment for the debt are not bigger than they were 10 years ago because of the low interest rate. So now, if the interest rate now goes up, I mean, that's when it's gonna, and there, for these big players, of course, a small hike in the interest rate is billions and can have a huge, do you think that the pressure from the politicians to keep it down and steer the national banks to not go that route by increasing that, it will put the lid on the increase of the interest rate, or do you think it will slowly go ting, 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 ting?
I think that's a major threat, Niels, for all the developed world, and to be honest, I don't know what will be the outcome of next years in this regard. There is, of course, a name for this, fiscal dominance. There is, amongst economists, the growing angst that politicians will push central bankers to raise interest rates so much, and I agree with that. I'm afraid of this fiscal dominance, that fiscal policy will dominate monetary policy. That is the policy of central banks, and we need monetary dominance. But without this monetary dominance, I think there is a very high likelihood of inflation, of weakening currencies, of debasement of the currencies, and so on. So I am quite afraid, and because politicians have strong incentives not to let interest rates go up. Look just into Turkey, because their president has ousted central bank governor because of he was just too pushy for interest rates, but it was normal monetary policy. Not all politicians are like a Turkish president, of course, but amongst Western politicians, you may see, and I think it's from their point of view, it's logical, because they see the huge debts and they know. And once there is even slight increase in interest rates, it's a big problem for them. So for me, that's a major question for today, how this fight will develop. And of course, I think we need a monetary dominance, but it means that some states, some countries may go bankrupt.
Of course.
The countries with very high debts, like even in Europe, like Greece and potentially Italy, and it may have some domino effect or chain reaction for all the countries in the region, southern part of Eurozone, for example, and we may have another debt crisis of Eurozone like 10 years ago or 2012. And I am afraid, I think it's quite big or
likelihood, yeah.
Well, the likelihood is quite high that this will happen in coming year, especially with the strong inflationary pressures we mentioned. Even though they are transitory, it may, for example, go into another spiral,
of course,
and be more than just transitory. So, and then central banks would need to increase interest rates, and then you may have those countries that are with high debts really going bankrupt.
But it could see that it could be almost everybody. That's not only Portugal,
because
Spain, Italy, and Greece.
Politicians live in a limbo, and they think that the low interest rates, ultra low interest rates, are here to stay forever, and that's a very dangerous bias on their side, I think. And central banks should, and this Czech National Bank, I think, is in this regard very reasonable, because it is afraid of inflation, even transitory inflation. So once we have politicians that think that interest rates so low as today are here to stay forever, it's one of the major danger for economy and society of the given country. And politicians do not understand monetary policy. They do not understand it. They think that it's just the central banks who set interest rates. But in setting interest rates, central bank react to forces they are outside of their control.
Of course,
Like geopolitical forces or demographic forces or technological forces. They are out of its competence to influence. So even central banks just react to it. And when there is change in these forces, for example, if there is a strong geopolitical pressure between the United States and China, this pressure is an inflationary pressure, because when there is a new Cold War, you need to move the production from China to Western world, but of course it will be much more expensive to pay wages in France instead of Shenzhen or Shanghai. So that's inflationary pressure that is outside of the influence of central bank. And once there is inflation from some Cold War, central banks would need to go with its interest rates up to do many hikes, and then there may be bankruptcies of the countries like Greece or Italy.
And do you think that the shortening of the supply chain is transitory, or is that something that's going to be more and more back from China to Europe, or is it just going to be a wave now and then it's so much cheaper in China, let's just continue to produce there?
Just a few weeks ago, I moderated a panel organized by Nordic Chamber of Commerce here in the Czech Republic, and it was very interesting. And the guests, the speakers, I asked the same question, and they told me that this is here to stay, that it's not just transitory phenomena, that near sourcing or shortening of the production chains is a new trend. Is to partially it's connected with pandemic and partially with geopolitical tensions, because it's now more risky for the companies in the Western world to have such a long production chains. I don't know, we will see, but at least to some extent I think it's not transitory, it's here to stay longer time.
But I would think that if promoted that people, Czech customers would like to buy Czech, and they would be willing to pay a little bit more to have a Czech product or a European product or an American.
I am not sure with Czech consumers, because Czech consumers
but
are really,
in general,
they are not typical. They are very sensitive to price. So once there is a little bit lower price for, let's say, Apple, they will go for Polish Apple instead of Czech one, even though they see the Czech flag on the Czech Apple.
But there has been done very little, I think, here to promote Czech products and.
Yeah, I think it's improving. It has been improving the last 5 or 8 years, but still Czechs are very sensitive. But I think they are not typical compared to other nations in the Western world. So I think in general this really may be game changer. But I think not in the Czech Republic.
Maybe not. I mean, in Norway we don't produce anything anymore, so we have to buy everything from China or maybe from Czech Republic. I don't know, but it's I think that if the Americans are, they're going buy a Chevy, it's American quality. And
yeah, we are not definitely like Americans, definitely not, and we won't be anytime soon. So. It's interesting because, for example, many Czechs, my friends, are quite strong critics of China, especially currently. And when I ask them, okay, so you don't you don't wear clothes from China, you don't have shoes with China, look at it, and of course it's made in China, made in China, made in China.
And all the electronics,
all the electronics. It's really difficult, to be honest, to really go to your life without anything from China. But still these people are so critical, but then they are using the China production. And so this shopping patriotism, as I would call it, I think in Czech Republic is very, very weak.
I also think in general
it may be stronger.
Maybe with agricultural products and certain, but the rest.
But we will be the last country in Western world that would accept this shopping patriotism.
No, that could be. That could be. So, is there any of the listeners out there who have any questions? Because that will be the last chance to. I don't know. I can see none on my laptop here, or on my iPad. So I think that we can phrase the last question to you, and that is, so when is this over? When are we going to have a normalized situation like it was before the pandemic? Is it in 1 year or will it never come?
We will have normal life and we will have it pretty soon.
You think
the
so?
End of this year. I am optimist, as I said, so I hope so. But in general, of course, not all sectors will recover, as we already said. So some sectors are damaged forever and finished forever even. But
or
economy,
reduced like ours.
Economy as general is very robust organism that can overcome crises and wars and famines and everything. So I'm not afraid in any sense that that would pose longer term problem for the economy as a whole. But of course, some firms, some entrepreneurs, some even sectors will have huge problems and maybe lost forever. But economy as a whole, I think, will prosper pretty soon.
Let's hope so. Is there anything you would like to add, or I think we have come to the end of our session here.
Thank you very much for a nice interview. Thank you for great questions, Nils. And what do you think about the situation in your country, in Norway?
Well, in Norway, I have been living abroad for so long, so I don't know. But we always have had the oil to patch over every hole that is in the road, so it has been quite easy for them. But they will now that the world economy is becoming more and more independent of oil. We need long term to find other legs to stand on, and I don't see it with the prices of Norwegian labor and taxes and how expensive everything is there to do because of distances and climate and everything. I cannot see where it's coming from. So I think Norway just have to open.
And one more question, because there has been debate about the approach to a pandemic, and because we are Nordic Chamber of Commerce, so there was big difference between Sweden, between the Swedish approach and approach in Denmark, for instance. So with the benefit of hindsight, can you assess what of these two different ways was better, epidemiologically and economically?
Well, if you compare, it was the Swedish approach was definitely better for the economy, but it was a lot worse for the the pandemic. They had huge deaths, number of deaths, and they had to back off that.
Yeah.
But they managed to keep the school up, open all the time, and most businesses, even restaurants, at lower levels with distancing, social distancing, mask mandate, etc., etc. But in the beginning, they said we will get herd immunity and just let it come, but they had to back down from that stance in the fall of last year. So economically it was better, but as you know, health-wise, I think in Norway it died, a couple of thousand, and in Sweden 10 times more. So it was huge differences in cases and deaths more than anything. So in Scandinavia we had, or in Nordic countries we had everything. But it was only Sweden in the whole whole Europe that
it was
shows that risky path.
Kind of laboratory experiment with whole society.
Yeah, sure.
You have a control group of countries like Denmark and Norway, and then you have a country with that you do the experiment like Sweden. So for the next pandemic we will have results of that experiment.
We hope so, yeah.
And we will see what's better compared. It's difficult, of course, to compare human lives and GDP. Completely different things. You cannot compare it because one life, for some people, if there is
you
a
cannot
family
put a
member,
price on it, and
you
GDP
cannot,
is a price.
Yeah,
so
you cannot price it, and so that's out of the reach of an economist to really answer this question.
Okay, Mr. Kovanda, I thank you so much for coming. It was highly interesting. I just hope that next year, if you come back, that we're not still in that crisis and that you are right and I'm wrong in these issues.
Thank you very much,
for
Neil.
coming.
Thank you for inviting me.